My daughter said I was nothing to her after paying her rent, college fees, and phone bills. So I showed her what being nothing really meant. I canceled her rent payment, phone bills payment, and emptied her college funds. What happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you everything. First, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Kennedy Bray from Atlanta. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. I used to think being a good father meant showing up, physically, financially, consistently. Not just when it was convenient or when there were milestones to celebrate, but in the in-between moments when no one was watching. When my daughter was born, I remember holding her in that stiff, plastic hospital chair with her tiny fist curled around my pinky, and I made a quiet promise to myself. I would never be like my father. He left when I was 6 and only resurfaced when he needed money or pity. I swore I'd never let my child feel that kind of absence. And for 20 years, I didn't. I worked 2 jobs at times, took freelance gigs during my lunch breaks, and ate cheap takeout while she went on school trips and wore the brand names her friends had. I made sure she never had to think twice about where the money came from. Rent? Covered. Phone bill? On my plan. College? I set up a fund for her before she even learned how to ride a bike. There was a time when she appreciated it, or at least pretended to. On Father's Day, she'd draw me cards, then later text a quick, "love you," with a heart emoji. It wasn't much, but it was something. And even if her mother tried to minimize my efforts, tried to spin me as the absent one despite my presence, I stayed focused on what mattered, that my daughter had what she needed. When her mom and I split, it was messy. She got the house. I got weekends and whatever scraps of affection were left. Still, I never once fought about the money. I paid what the court said and then some. Because that's what fathers do. Or so I thought. It's funny how the sacrifices we make become invisible once they become expected. She never saw the days I walked instead of drove to save gas. Never noticed when I wore the same old coat year after year while she changed phones like outfits. I never wanted her to worry about money, but maybe that was the mistake. Maybe if she had seen me struggle, if she had watched me sweat over bills and delay my own medical appointments, she might have learned the value behind each dollar. But I kept it hidden. I wore the burden quietly, thinking I was shielding her from the hard stuff. Turns out, I was just raising someone who thought hard stuff didn't apply to her. The beginning of the end started with a request, no, a demand, for another $1,000 towards something vague. A program fee for college, though she couldn't explain what it covered. I asked questions, reasonable ones. Where was the invoice? Had she checked if it was included in her tuition? Was it urgent? She rolled her eyes over the phone like I was being unreasonable. It's just $1,000. You can afford it, she said, her tone sharp and dismissive. I swallowed the urge to snap. I've paid your rent, your phone, and your tuition this month already. Can you ask your mom to help with this one? There was a long pause on the line. Then came the blow I never saw coming. You're nothing to me if all you care about is money. Just like that. Flat, cold, without even a tremor in her voice. I blinked, stunned. Excuse me. I managed. Nothing, she repeated. You're just some guy who throws cash around and thinks that makes you a father. I sat back in my chair, my heart racing like I'd just been slapped. The silence between us stretched too long. She didn't fill it. She didn't apologize. She hung up. I sat there staring at my phone, the call log still glowing. You're nothing to me. The words echoed louder the longer I sat still. I couldn't wrap my head around it. I thought of all the nights I stayed up sorting bills so she wouldn't feel the sting of a missed payment. The times I said no to myself so I could say yes to her. The years of being steady even when her mother weaponized custody or used guilt to manipulate the narrative. I wasn't perfect, but I was never nothing. I wanted to believe she didn't mean it, that it was a slip of anger. But she never called back, never texted, no follow-up, no apology, no context. Just silence. And I knew then, it wasn't a mistake. It was clarity. She said it because she believed it. I was useful until I questioned her entitlement. Disposable once I stopped giving without question. And that realization hurt worse than anything else. The idea that my love had been measured in transactions, not time. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying the moment, wondering where I went wrong. Was I too generous? Too distant? Too hard to read? But each answer circled back to the same truth. I had done everything I could. And if she couldn't see that, if she didn't value that, then maybe it was time I stopped proving my worth to someone who had already decided I was worthless. That was the first time I considered pulling back. Not out of revenge, but out of self-preservation. Because continuing to pay for someone who sees you as nothing isn't generosity, it's self-destruction. So I made a quiet promise to myself, much like the one I made the day she was born. But this time, it wasn't about showing up. It was about letting go. I kept telling myself I was overreacting. That maybe I'd misheard her, maybe I misunderstood the tone, or maybe she was just stressed. College can do that. Make young people say cruel things they don't fully mean. I told myself all of it, like mantras I didn't even believe, just so I wouldn't have to face the truth that my own daughter saw me as nothing more than a bank account with a name. But the silence that followed her words spoke louder than anything else. No follow-up text, no apology. No, I didn't mean it like that. Just 24 hours of silence, and then another, and another. That's when I realized it hadn't been an accident. It was something she'd been sitting on for a while, and when I finally said no, it gave her the excuse to let it fly. The full conversation had started off so normal. She called me between classes and started with small talk. The weather, her classes, how her roommate's boyfriend was annoying. I could hear music playing in the background, and she was chewing gum, distracted. Then, as if it had slipped her mind until the last second, she added, "Oh, and I need like $1,000 for this semester's program fee. They told us late, so I need it by Friday." No greeting, no can I ask. Just a statement. Like she was placing a drive-through order. I asked her what it was for, and she got defensive. "I don't know, Dad. It's just what they said. Everyone has to pay it." I asked if she could send me the invoice or forward the email. She sighed loud enough to rattle the phone speaker. "Why do you always make this a thing?" I could feel the heat rise in my chest. I had heard this tone before, the one her mother used when I questioned an expense or dared to ask for clarity. The same tone that said, "You're annoying me just by being cautious." I stayed calm. "I've already paid your rent and your phone this month, and I just made a payment toward tuition. I'm not saying no. I'm saying I need to understand what I'm paying for. That's fair." She didn't even let me finish. "You know what? Never mind. This is why I hate coming to you for anything. You act like I'm begging you." I blinked. "I'm not acting like you're begging. I'm asking you to treat me like I'm not just a wallet." That's when she snapped. "You're nothing to me if all you care about is money." It didn't come out in a scream or a sob. It came out calm, cold, dismissive. I had to look at the phone to make sure it hadn't been someone else. "What did you say?" I asked, needing her to walk it back, needing some sign that she realized what she'd just done. But she didn't stutter. She doubled down. "You're just some guy who throws money around and thinks that makes you a father. It doesn't. You're basically nothing." Then she hung up. Just like that. No warning, no flinch. Like she was slamming a door shut behind her. I stared at the wall for a long time after that. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat there in a stunned kind of quiet. There's a pain that doesn't come with tears. It comes with stillness. Like your body goes numb because it doesn't want to feel what just happened. I'd been her father for 20 years. I taught her how to tie her shoes, helped her with math homework, held her through breakups and meltdowns. And in less than a minute, she erased all of it. Like it never mattered. Like I never mattered. I wasn't angry at first. I was devastated. That night, I tried to sleep but couldn't. Her words kept playing over and over like a cruel little loop in my head. "You're nothing to me." I kept wondering what version of me she saw. Did she think the money just appeared? That I handed over thousands a month with no thought or cost to myself? Had I made fatherhood look so easy that she forgot it wasn't? Or had she just never cared in the first place? I thought about every Christmas I drove across town to drop off gifts because her mom refused to meet halfway. Every late-night call I answered when she was scared or upset. I did all of it thinking I was building something real, something unbreakable. But apparently, I was just building a resume she could toss in the trash the moment I became inconvenient. By morning, the devastation had started to calcify into something sharper. Not rage, but resolve. I was tired. Tired of being treated like an obligation, like a backup generator that kicked on when her mother failed to deliver. Tired of having to prove, over and over, that I was good enough to matter. I thought I was investing in a relationship. Turns out, I was just funding entitlement. And if that's how she saw me, if nothing was her final word, then maybe I needed to start acting like it. I didn't text her that day. I didn't call. I didn't try to explain myself or ask for a redo. I waited to see if she would reach out. She didn't. Not even a passive-aggressive message. Nothing. And it hit me then. Maybe this wasn't a crack in the foundation. Maybe this was the foundation. Maybe all these years, I'd been the only one who thought this relationship had weight. And if she was fine walking away, then I needed to be fine letting her go. That realization didn't come with relief. It came with grief, but also a strange kind of peace. By the third day of silence, I stopped waiting for her to call. Something in me shifted. It wasn't immediate, like flicking off a light switch. It was slower, heavier, like a tired man finally setting down a weight he carried for too long. I woke up that morning, poured myself a cup of black coffee, and instead of scrolling through news or checking my emails like I usually did, I opened my banking app. I stared at the screen for a long minute. There it was, the recurring rent transfer scheduled for the first of every month, her phone bill bundled into mine, the automatic tuition withdrawal tied to her student ID. She didn't know half of it existed. She just assumed things got paid, because they always had. But if I was nothing to her, then she needed to understand what that really meant. I deleted every scheduled payment without fanfare. One by one. Click. Confirm. Done. I felt a strange tightness in my chest, but I pushed through it. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reality. It took less than 10 minutes to undo 20 years of sacrifice. That's what gutted me the most. How easy it was. I expected a dramatic scene, like something in a courtroom or a family drama movie. Papers flying, shouting, tears. But in real life, it was just a man and his mouse, quietly cutting ties. After that, I logged into the phone plan and removed her line. The screen warned me there would be a penalty fee. I clicked accept. I paid it without hesitation. Then I logged into the account holding her college fund, an account I'd been contributing to since she was in diapers, and transferred the entire balance into my private savings. No, not out of spite. Out of understanding. If I was just a wallet to her, then I had every right to close the account. I wasn't going to bankroll disrespect. I wasn't going to fund contempt. I wasn't going to keep bleeding for someone who wouldn't even acknowledge the wound. The first phone call came that evening. Not from her, from my ex-wife. I saw her name flash on my screen and let it go to voicemail. A minute later, the message came through, her voice high and shrill with performative rage. You really think this is okay? You cut off her rent, her phone. Are you out of your mind? You're ruining her life. I played the message twice, then deleted it. A few minutes later, she called again. This time I picked up. Don't call me again, I said calmly. She started in immediately, yelling about my responsibilities, about how I was leaving our daughter homeless, about how I was acting like a child. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't interrupt. I just waited until she paused to breathe and said, she told me I'm nothing to her, so I'm finally acting like it. Then I ended the call and blocked her number. The silence that followed was different this time. It wasn't the anxious, jittery kind I felt earlier in the week. It was firm, final, like the sound that lingers after you slam a door shut and know, deep down, you're not opening it again. I sat down on the couch, turned off the lights, and just listened to the quiet of my own house. No ping of new texts. No drama playing out through my phone. Just stillness. I used to think silence was lonely. That night, it felt like peace. I had spent years letting guilt dictate my decisions. Guilt that I left the marriage. Guilt that I didn't fight harder for custody. Guilt that maybe I hadn't been emotionally available enough. But guilt isn't the same as love, and I wasn't going to let it run my life anymore. The next day, the messages started rolling in. My daughter's phone had obviously been disconnected, because I started getting emails instead. At first, they were passive-aggressive. Hey, my phone's not working, can you check the plan? Followed by my landlord said the rent didn't go through. When I didn't respond, she escalated. Seriously? Are you ghosting me? Then came the guilt trip. This is so messed up. I have midterms this week. Do you want me to fail? Still, I said nothing. I deleted the emails one by one without reading past the first line. The final one came 3 days later. All caps. You're so sick. Less sensitive than a stranger. I hope you're happy. I didn't even open that one. Just dragged it to trash and emptied the folder. I wasn't proud of how it felt. But I won't lie, it felt clean. For the first time in years, I wasn't chasing anyone. I wasn't apologizing for decisions made out of love. I wasn't defending myself to people who didn't care about my side. I was just a man, reclaiming his peace, one silent minute at a time. That weekend, I went for a walk without checking my phone once. I watched a movie by myself and didn't pause to answer any calls. I cooked a meal that wasn't microwaved. And when I sat down to eat it, I didn't feel like a father in crisis. I felt like a man finally remembering who he was before all the emotional debt buried him. The real surprise came from people who did notice. A mutual family friend reached out, someone who'd seen both sides of this thing over the years. I heard what happened, she texted. You okay? I told her the truth. I'm not okay. But I'm not sorry either. She called later that night and told me something I wasn't expecting. She's been saying things like that for a while. Just not to your face. I paused, unsure how to respond. You mean, this wasn't new? She sighed. No. She's been angry at you since high school. But no one wanted to tell you. We thought she'd grow out of it. I sat in silence, the final pieces falling into place. The truth was, I'd been playing a losing game for years. I just didn't realize the scoreboard was never in my favor. It started on a Wednesday, middle of the week, nothing special about it. I was making coffee when my sister called, which was already strange enough since she usually texted first. I picked up, half expecting her to ask about some family event I forgot, but her tone came sharp and fast. Have you seen what your daughter posted? My heart dipped into that old, familiar place, the one filled with dread. I hadn't seen anything. I hadn't checked her social media in weeks, not since everything went down. I'd been trying to stay off it entirely. But now I knew I had to look. And when I did, it hit me like a punch to the ribs. There it was, an Instagram story, already reposted by a few of her friends. A photo of her in her dorm room, lit only by a desk lamp, with a caption in big, bold white letters. Imagine your dad cutting you off during midterms and telling you he doesn't care if you fail or go homeless. Fathers should protect, not abandon. Below that, another line. I guess money is more important than love to some people. I stared at the screen, my hand trembling with a mix of anger and something worse, disappointment. Not in her, not even in what she wrote, but in how easily she turned me into a villain for public consumption. No one knew the full story. She made sure of that. And yet, there she was, gathering sympathy, likes, validation from strangers while I sat alone with the truth. The comments were worse. People I'd never met piling on, calling me selfish, abusive, heartless. How can a parent just cut off their kid like that? One read. He must be a narcissist, said another. And then, the one that lodged itself in my gut. Some people shouldn't have kids if they're not going to show up emotionally. I wanted to scream. To post screenshots, receipts, payment logs, maybe even excerpts of our last text to show how long and hard I had tried. But I didn't. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew that once I started defending myself to the internet, I'd lose something even more important than public image. I'd lose my peace. Later that night, my phone lit up again. This time, it was my cousin Nina, who always walked the tightrope between family loyalty and social media gossip. Hey, she started, too carefully. Just wanted to say, I saw your daughter's post. And I know it doesn't tell the whole story. I didn't say anything. I just let her talk. Look, she continued, you've always been there for her. I've seen it. But you know how people are. They only see what's loudest. And right now, she's loud. I let out a dry laugh. Yeah, loud and ungrateful. Nina hesitated before saying, she's hurting, but that doesn't mean she's right. You can be hurt and still be wrong. That hit me harder than any Instagram caption. Because she was right. My daughter was hurting. And part of me still wanted to fix it. But I couldn't keep doing that if she only ever responded by trying to break me. By the end of the week, the story had fizzled down from the public square, but lit up behind closed doors. I got calls from 2 of my aunts, both concerned, but not really curious about the truth. Couldn't you just help her out one more time? One asked, as if I hadn't been doing that since the day she turned 18. You're the parent, the others said. You're supposed to rise above. I nearly laughed at that one. Rise above? I had risen above. For years, I bit my tongue, swallowed my hurt, and paid bills that weren't mine to carry just to keep peace. I rose above until there was nothing left of me but bruised pride and empty bank statements. The pressure didn't stop there. Her mom called again using a different number, one I hadn't blocked. I let it ring, but she left a voicemail I couldn't ignore. This time, she didn't yell. Her voice was low, tired, maybe even rehearsed. You're making a mistake, she said. You're teaching her that love is conditional. That's going to ruin her. I listened to the message 3 times, each time feeling the grip in my chest get tighter. Conditional? I'd given her unconditional love for years. But love isn't the same as enabling. And boundaries aren't conditions, they're consequences. I didn't know her endless support, especially not after she discarded me like a used napkin. I owed myself the dignity of not being used. For the first time in a long time, I reached out to someone who'd actually seen the full scope of my effort, my friend Marcus, who watched me grind through all the years of co-parenting hell. We met for dinner, and after I vented everything, Instagram, voicemails, the family guilt trips, he leaned back, looked me straight in the eye, and said, "You did what most of us dream of doing. You chose yourself. That doesn't make you a monster. That makes you finally free." I felt something crack inside me. Relief, maybe. Or release. The kind that doesn't come with applause, but with a long exhale. I didn't need to be understood by everyone. I just needed to stop explaining myself to people who would never see past their own narratives. Still, at night, the guilt crept in like fog under a door. I'd think about her as a little girl, the one who used to hold my hand crossing parking lots, the one who'd cry when I dropped her back at her mother's house. I'd wonder when exactly that little girl disappeared and who replaced her with this cold stranger wearing her face. But even in that ache, I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't go back. Not now. Not after everything. Because sometimes the only way to teach someone what love isn't is by taking it away. Silence used to be my enemy. I grew up in a house where it meant something was wrong, where raised voices were followed by slammed doors and then hours of nothing. That kind of quiet wasn't peace, it was pressure. So as an adult, I filled my life with noise. Talk radio in the mornings, TV humming through dinner, calls from my daughter at all hours. Even when we argued, even when the calls were laced with guilt or entitlement, I clung to them. Because at least it meant I still mattered to her. But now silence was all I had. And I was surprised to find it didn't feel like punishment anymore. It felt like recovery, like letting a bruised muscle rest. Every morning, I woke up to a quiet house and no new messages. It was like the volume of my own thoughts finally had room to rise. At first, the silence felt too wide, like I could hear my own breathing louder than usual, like the empty rooms around me echoed with memories I wasn't ready to face. I kept seeing her in flashes, 9 years old, laughing with syrup on her face at breakfast, 16 and heartbroken, sobbing into my shoulder about her first breakup. 20 and confident, rolling her eyes while asking for money she'd never say thank you for. These ghosts stayed close in the first week. They hovered in the spaces she used to fill, reminding me that silence wasn't absence, it was confrontation. It made me face the fact that she wasn't a little girl anymore, and I wasn't the father she imagined. I was a man with limits, and she had reached every one of them. I tried distracting myself, but nothing filled the space the way I wanted it to. TV shows felt hollow, books sat unfinished on the coffee table, and music reminded me too much of long car rides when she used to control the playlist. I cleaned the kitchen twice in one day just to keep moving. But eventually, the silence forced me to sit still. And in that stillness, I started to realize something I hadn't admitted before. I was grieving. Not just the loss of her, but the loss of who I thought I was. I had built my entire identity around being her father. That title gave me purpose. It gave me direction. And now that it felt severed, cut off by her words and my own decision, it was like walking through life without a compass. I kept hearing people say, "She'll come around," like it was some kind of comfort. But I didn't want her to come around. Not if it meant pretending none of this ever happened. Not if it meant sweeping years of disrespect under the rug for the sake of appearances. I didn't want the old relationship back. I wanted something real, something with mutual respect. And if that wasn't possible, I'd rather have nothing. That's the hardest part to explain to people. That choosing yourself over your child isn't the same as giving up. Sometimes it's the only way to stop the bleeding. Sometimes love means walking away from the version of the relationship that's killing you. Marcus came by one evening without calling first. He knocked, holding a six-pack and a tired look like he knew I'd probably been stewing in my own head all day. We sat in silence for a while, both sipping beer and watching a game we weren't really paying attention to. Finally, he said, "She ever try to call again?" I shook my head. "Not since the post." He nodded, like he wasn't surprised. "She's waiting for you to crack first." I looked over at him. "You think I should?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You cracked for 20 years, man. You bent every which way for her. You covered for her mom. You paid for things you never got credit for. At some point, it's not a crack. It's just breaking yourself in half for someone who never plans to glue you back together." His words sat heavy between us. I didn't respond. Didn't need to. He wasn't telling me anything I didn't already know. But hearing it out loud from someone who knew the full story made it real in a way I hadn't let myself feel. I nodded slowly, letting it sink in. "She said I was nothing," I finally said, my voice flat. Marcus gave a short, bitter laugh. "Well, then she's about to find out how hard life gets when nothing stops paying the bills." The silence returned after he left, but it didn't sting as much. I sat by the window and watched the sky change from orange to dark blue. I thought about calling her. Not to fix anything, just to hear her voice. But I didn't. Because I knew what I really wanted was a version of her that didn't exist anymore. A version of me that still believed this could be salvaged without burning myself to the ground. That's the tricky part about boundaries. They feel like abandonment at first. But over time, they start to look like survival. Each day, the silence became easier to carry. It wasn't empty, it was space. Space for me to think, to rest, to heal. I started journaling again, something I hadn't done since before she was born. Just scribbling thoughts, nothing profound. But it helped. I wrote about who I used to be, who I wanted to become, and what it meant to be a father when no one's watching. I didn't have answers yet, but I had the questions. And for once, I was willing to sit with them instead of rushing to fix everything. I sat at my desk one Saturday morning with the sunlight creeping in through the blinds, casting striped shadows across the hardwood. My coffee had gone cold, but I wasn't ready to move. In front of me sat a blank sheet of paper. Actual paper, not a screen for once. I'd been carrying the urge to write her something for weeks. Not a plea or a threat, just something final. Not to be sent, just written. Something to empty the last bit of her out of my system, the way you wring out a soaked towel after a storm. I didn't have a plan, no bullet points or clever openings. Just grief tangled with love, and a quiet understanding that I had reached the end of what I could give. I started with her name. Just her name. Writing it felt like a door creaking open somewhere inside me, one I hadn't dared touch since I cut her off. Then, slowly, I began to write the things I hadn't said out loud. That I'd loved her fiercely from the start. That I'd sacrificed in silence for longer than she'll probably ever understand. That I never expected her to be perfect, only honest. I told her how much it hurt when she called me nothing, not because of the insult itself, but because I realized in that moment that she believed it. That my worth to her had been whittled down to what I could pay, and the second I withheld it, she vanished. I told her I wasn't angry anymore, just tired. Tired of explaining, tired of giving, tired of bleeding love for someone who wouldn't even acknowledge the wound. I wrote about the silence that followed, about how it gutted me at first, and then slowly became my oxygen. I admitted that I missed her, but not the version of her that hurled accusations like knives. I missed the little girl who used to fall asleep on my chest during Sunday naps, the one who made me macaroni art and thought I was a superhero. I missed being needed for more than my debit card, but I didn't want that version back. I'd let her go, and I had to let go of who I was with her too. I folded the letter slowly when I finished, slid it into a drawer without sealing it. I didn't need to send it. Writing it was enough. Sometimes closure isn't a conversation, it's a release. After that, I started making small changes in my routine. I took walks without headphones, letting the hum of the world replace the weight of old thoughts. I joined a local gym, not because I wanted to bulk up or chase vanity, but because I needed a reason to show up for myself. I even went to a few community events, silent auctions, fundraisers, things I used to skip because I was always too tired or too preoccupied with bills, with parenting, with stress. I was surprised how many people remembered me from years ago, before I disappeared into the role of single dad, walking paycheck. One woman, a teacher I hadn't seen in over a decade, said, "You look lighter, happier even." I smiled, because she wasn't wrong. My phone stayed quiet through all of this. No calls from her. No messages. No new voicemails from her mother. Part of me wondered if that would ever change, but a bigger part of me hoped it wouldn't. Not until it could be real. Not until there was accountability. I wasn't looking for an apology I could frame and hang on the wall. I just wanted to know that if she ever came back, she'd come as someone willing to have an honest, mutual relationship. Not a demand. Not a transaction. A relationship. But I also knew I couldn't live my life waiting for that day. If it came, it came. If it didn't, I had to be okay anyway. Eventually, I ran into an old friend at the grocery store, a guy named Reggie I hadn't spoken to in years. We ended up talking in the parking lot for almost an hour. I told him everything. The blow-up, the silence, the social media circus, and he said something that stuck with me in the days that followed. People confuse parenting with martyrdom, he said. But at some point, loving your kid doesn't mean setting yourself on fire to keep them warm, especially when they're the one holding the match. I didn't respond then. I just nodded. But his words looped through my head all week. Because I had set myself on fire, again and again. And I was finally done burning. That weekend, I visited my mother. She was older now, slower, a little more forgetful than she used to be, but sharp enough to see through me. I hadn't told her everything, only bits and pieces. But when I sat at her table and she poured me a cup of tea, she looked at me the way only a mother can and said, "You look like someone who's been holding his breath for years and just started breathing again." I laughed, almost choked on the tea. "Something like that," I said. We didn't talk about my daughter. Not directly. But at the end of the visit, she hugged me tighter than usual and said, "Don't forget, peace isn't selfish. It's survival." I held on to that on the drive home, repeating it like a quiet chant. Peace isn't selfish. Peace is survival. So no, I didn't call her. I didn't unblock her. I didn't stalk her Instagram to see if she'd changed her tone. I lived. I chose to keep living in my own space, under my own terms, with my dignity intact. I had spent years building a version of fatherhood that demanded everything and gave little in return. But now I was building something else. Something smaller. Simpler. It wasn't flashy. It didn't come with accolades. But it was mine. I was redefining what it meant to love someone without letting them destroy you. And I wasn't going back. If this story hit home, you're not alone. Sometimes, choosing yourself feels like failure. But it's actually the first step toward freedom. What would you have done in this father's shoes? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you've ever had to set a boundary with family, share your story. Your voice might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if you want more stories that dive deep into family, betrayal, and tough decisions, like, share, and subscribe to stay connected. We're just getting started. See you soon in the next story.